Cinderella. In a manor of stone, where the ivy had clung, lived Cinderella, whose spirit was stung. Though once she was cherished, the apple of her father's eye, her status had withered as the years drifted by. She labored in silence, a picture of grace, despite the dark soot on her delicate face. Her life was a tattered and lackluster thing, devoid of the joy that a young life should bring. Bound by the hearth in her garments of brown, she dreamt of a world far beyond her small town. Emma, the stepmother, snobbish and cold, had a notorious greed and a heart grown old. She sought to alienate and harshly belittle, with words that were sharp and tempers quite brittle. Her abysmal disdain was a shadow that loomed in a house where the flowers of kindness ne'er bloomed. She flourished in finery, opulent and grand, while ruling the home with a heavy-handed hand. To Emma, her stepchild was merely a chore, a nuisance she wished to ignore even more. Then Jocelyn entered, ecstatic and vain, with a mind that was shallow and prone to complain. She preened in the mirror with infantile pride, with no room for empathy hidden inside. "Am I not the most radiant girl in the land?" she asked with a flutter of her manicured hand. Her ego was vast, a stupendous display, as she tossed her silk ribbons in a careless array. She viewed Cinderella as nothing but dirt, oblivious to how much her arrogance hurt. Sarah appeared with a cacophonous shout, to bicker and squabble and wander about. Her infantile tantrums were frequent and loud, like a sudden dark burst from a thunderous cloud. She was petty and spiteful, a whirlwind of greed, with a desperate hunger for attention to feed. "I deserve all the jewels," she screamed at the wall, as she tripped on her skirts in the grand entry hall. The sisters were mirrors of Emma's own soul, exerting a cruel and relentless control. The sibilant sounds of the scrubbing brush swept, as Cinderella worked while the household still slept. Softly she sighed in the silence so deep, while shadows like sentinels started to creep. The monotonous rhythm of toil was her song, in a world where she felt she did never belong. "Sweep, sweep," sang the bristles on cold, dusty stone, a melody meant for the weary and lone. Every surface must shimmer, every corner must shine, for Emma demanded a mansion divine. A royal invite arrived at the door, causing Emma's excitement to rapidly soar. "A ball at the palace," she cried with a grin, "a chance for my daughters to finally win." Cinderella approached with a modest request, "May I also attend and be dressed in my best?" But Emma's response was an atrocious display. "The notion is out of the question today. You lack the right clothes and you lack the right hair. Your presence would mar the whole royal affair." To exacerbate matters and sharpen the sting, Emma forbade her from doing a thing. "You shall stay by the ashes," she sneered with a hiss, "while your sisters experience heavenly bliss." Sarah laughed at the girl in her rags of dull brown. "You look like a peasant from some dusty town." "Quite right," Emma added. "Your hope is a crime. Now go to the kitchen and don't waste my time." The cruelty felt like a heavy, cold chain, as Cinderella's heart buckled under the strain. The sisters departed in silk and in lace, leaving Cinderella in that desolate space. Jocelyn and Sarah were draped in their best, with feathers and jewels on each heaving chest. Cinderella was truly inconsolable then, as she wept in the garden away from all men. She was crestfallen, blue, and remarkably sad, for the loss of the dreams that she previously had. The carriage rolled off with a thunderous sound, leaving only the dust on the cold, stony ground. But then, with a whoosh and a shimmer of light, a figure emerged from the shadows of night. It was Millie, a vision in layers of pink, who arrived in a flash, in the blink of a wink. "Do not weep, dear child," she said with a smile, "for your luck is about to go the extra mile. I am your godmother, sent from the stars, to heal all your worries and hide all your scars." Cinderella looked up with a gasp of surprise, as tears of pure wonder welled up in her eyes. Then Molly arrived, clad in brilliant blue, to collaborate on what they were prompted to do. "Two heads are better than one," Molly cried as she stood by her partner with sparkles and pride. They were like two peas in a pod, yet distinct. Their magical movements were perfectly synced. "We must hurry," said Millie. "The clock is our foe. There is much to prepare before you can go." With a flick and a flourish, the magic began as they set about working their miraculous plan. A pumpkin was transformed, an exemplary feat, into a carriage with a velvet-lined seat. Molly waved her blue wand at the mice in the shed, and horses appeared with a high-stepping tread. "But listen," said Millie, her voice quite severe. "There's a warning that you must be certain to hear. At the 11th hour, as the midnight bell rings, the magic will cease for all of these things. This rule is irrevocable, final and clear. You must depart before the last chime is near." Cinderella was stunned by the phenomenon there, as magic entwined in her elegantly coiled hair. Her tattered old rags had completely vanished, and all of her sorrow was totally banished. A gown of light pink, soft as morning's first glow, draped down to her feet in a shimmering flow. She was distinguished and graceful, a marvel to see, a personification of true ecstasy. "Go now," whispered Millie, "and dance through the night, for you are a vision of purest delight." The carriage arrived at the palace so grand, the most opulent building in all of the land. Cinderella stepped out, a mysterious guest, in a pink silken gown that outshone all the rest. The masquerade shimmered with music and light as she entered the hall in the middle of night. A hush swept the room like a soft velvet wave as the guests wondered, who was this girl, poised and brave? She walked with a gait that was regal and slow, under the chandelier's glittering glow. Prince Alistair stood by the ivory stair, with a noble demeanor and dark wavy hair. When he saw Cinderella, his heart skipped a beat, for her beauty was truly and wholly complete. He approached her with grace and a bow of his head. "May I have this dance?" was the first thing he said. He was charmed by the joy that her spirit revealed, and the kindness she offered that couldn't be concealed. To him, she was perfect, a treasure so rare, a breath of fresh, magical midsummer air. They danced through the hall, oblivious to all, the ultimate stars of the midwinter ball. They were perfectly compatible, two of a kind, with a bond that was forged in the soul and the mind. "This evening is magical," Alistair sighed. "I feel like a man who has nothing to hide." Cinderella replied with a stupendous smile. "I wish I could stay for a very long while." Their dialogue flowed like a river of gold, as a story of love started fast to unfold. But tick-tock went the clock as it screamed out the hour, and the magic began to lose all of its power. The personified bell gave a thunderous toll, striking a fear in the depths of her soul. "I must go," cried Cinderella in sudden despair, as she raced down the steps with her hands in the air. "Wait," called the prince. "I don't even know your name." But she fled, like a spark from a flickering flame. The midnight was coming. The magic would fade, ending the beautiful plans that were made. In her frantic withdrawal, she let out a gasp as one glass slipper slipped out of her grasp. It sat on the stone, a precarious prize, as Cinderella escaped from the prince's dark eyes. She reached the dark woods as the final bell rung, and the shadows of night once more round her clung. Her pink gown dissolved into tatters of brown as she hurried away from the lights of the town. Behind her, the slipper remained on the stair, a crystal reminder of one who was there. The next morning dawned with a gray, heavy light as Cinderella remembered the joy of the night. Back in her rags, by the hearth's dusty glow, she moved with a pace that was heavy and slow. Emma and sisters were bitter and mean, complaining of that girl who had acted the queen. "She was gaudy," said Jocelyn, "awful and pink. Her dress was a tragedy, don't you all think?" Cinderella stayed silent and focused on work, though a small, secret smile in her spirit did lurk. Prince Alistair vowed to discover his bride, with a team of his finest young men by his side. He followed an itinerary through the whole town, looking for the girl in the starlit pink gown. "I shall find her," he declared with a resolute tone, "for my heart now belongs to that maiden alone." The slipper was carried on cushions of red, as through every village the royal troops sped. Every maiden was hopeful, every house was prepared, as the prince's intention was loudly declared. When he reached the stone manor, the sisters were keen to fit their large feet in the shoe of the queen. Jocelyn was petulant, pushing and shoved, but the slipper refused to be moved or be loved. Her foot was too wide, and her toes were too long, for a shoe that was clearly not meant to belong. She huffed and she puffed with incompetent might, but the crystal would never accommodate her spite. Alistair sighed with a look of dismay, as he prepared to continue along on his way. Then Sarah stepped forward with infantile greed, determined to make her deception succeed. She had hidden the true slipper deep in her vest and produced a faux low-heeled one to pass the test. It was a replica, dull and made of cheap glass, which she hoped would allow her the trial to pass. She slid her foot in with a practiced, smug grin. "It fits me," she lied, "so I finally win." She looked at the prince with a fraudulent stare, hoping to trap him in her cunning snare. But Prince Alistair, an astute observer of truth, had been wise and discerning since the days of his youth. "Stop," he commanded. "This is bitter-sweet lies. I can see the deceit through your desperate eyes. This shoe is a forgery, lackluster and fake, a pathetic attempt for a kingdom's own sake." He reached for the crystal that Sarah had hidden, uncovering the truth that she'd tried to keep forbidden. To exacerbate her shame, he held the real shoe. The girl that I seek is not someone like you. Then Cinderella stepped forward, modest and shy, with a glimmer of hope in her emerald eye. "May I try the slipper?" she asked with a breath, in a silence as deep as the shadows of death. Emma stepped forward to block her own way. "She is only a servant. Let her be, I pray." But the prince intervened with a look of command, and placed the small slipper in Cinderella's hand. It fit her perfectly, sufficient and right, a replica of her soul's own internal light. The palace was draped in light pink for the day, as the wedding bells rang in a joyous array. Cinderella stood tall in her bridal pink gown, the most beloved queen in the whole of the town. She had found her true prince and a life of her own, far from the ashes and the manner of stone. For destiny calls and the history is made, when the courage of kindness is never delayed. And so they lived happily, ecstatic and free, as the apple of each other's eye for eternity.